At what point do you think you started considering the idea of, the ultimate relationship, the ultimate connection?
It's a great question. There was an undercurrent of this happening since I was 5, like playing in my backyard, playing house, coming up with storylines of what this, perfect day would look like, or what the man of my dreams or the prince would look like. So I believe that undercurrent of what do relationships look like was always there. Uh, but ultimately, it didn't really consciously ignite until my world started to crumble all around me. The titles, the religious beliefs, the cultural beliefs about who I should be and what character I should play. Once all of that started to crumble around me, I think I really started to have to get curious. I think it pulled me into this state of, if that wasn't real, what is? What is possible?
With the idea of an ultimate relationship, what do you think? What do you think that means?
There would never be, never is a strong word, this disconnect from myself. That the most natural connection to myself, my own emotions, my own thoughts, my own beliefs, my body, my own creation, that the ultimate connection would be that I don't leave that space, and that I'm able to share that experience with another. I get to connect with you in this space, and I don't need anything from you. You don't need anything from me, but we get to share and build in this space, experience, creation, ideas, expansion, exploration. We get to sit and share that space together. And so, yes, I think the ultimate relationship is the connection to ourselves, and then ultimately the permission for another person to also be doing the same, and just able to experience that present moment and that expansion of that present moment.
So what's the point of having a partner in this process of doing this, being in an intimate relationship?
Yeah. Being able to see ourselves in another, and being able to receive that reflection and that experience from another, I believe, times 10 our entire experience, maybe times 1,000. Who knows what the number really is to the formula, but we get to experience it all within ourselves, but it magnifies and grows when you're with another.
It's kind of like a mirror.
Yeah, it's a mirror. It's like if you were to put a mirror up to the sun, right? And just how bright and how big and how powerful that really gets.
So that's the goal.
That's the goal. Ultimately to see ourselves, but to experience it within another mirror. I remember this one time, it was right at the peak of what I would have said was my ultimate success. I had the dream home. I had this beautiful family, the marriage, cars, success in my business. I had reached the top of everything. And I remember I was 9 months pregnant, 8.5 months pregnant. I had dinner on the table, the house smelling like dessert. I had the yard done, the pool skimmed. I was, all dressed up, and I remember I couldn't wait for my spouse at the time to get home, and I thought this was the perfect moment to receive love and connection and validation. I remember he comes home, and clearly subconsciously I must have been overcompensating because I knew that my world was already crumbling. But he comes home and he says to me, if you're gonna mow the back lawn, you might as well mow the front one. Otherwise, it doesn't really do me any good. And I remember this moment, this quantum moment, so specifically because I had done everything that I could. Genuinely, anything that I could have done outside of me, I did it. I checked off all the boxes. And it was this very out-of-body experience for me to recognize that everything that I was doing was an illusion, and that none of it was actually going to get me what I wanted.
So what would you say the formula is, or the equation of illusion and of destruction?
I teach people all the time that we're wired to try and prove out or try and get something outside of ourselves. This happens at childhood. This happens when we start to experience, our parents are happy because we've done something, or teachers are happy because we do something, and we're taught, okay, go and do all of these things in order to have what you want in this life, and then you will become great. You'll become worthy. You'll become valuable. You'll become powerful, whatever it is. And so the formula is that we are wired to do and check all these boxes, and then we believe that we're going to have that happiness, we're going to have that fulfillment, and one day we might become great, one day we might become powerful, one day we might become creators. And ultimately that formula is the exact formula that creates the destruction. It's the exact formula that creates that illusion, because the truth is we already are. And that is the natural state of being. We already are that being state. We're not trying to go search for it or prove to get it. If you're watching this and you get anything from it, if you find yourself, trying to get something, right, and you feel like something is missing, that is your very indication that you're separated, you're not connected, because it's already here.
So once someone does feel that spark of a desire for something real, what does that process start to look like?
If you feel that spark, congratulations. You're well on your way to experiencing something real. And what I would say is that spark is that it's when things are quiet, mostly for people. It's when you're alone and you're not really thinking, or you're in the middle of the night, or you're ready to go to bed, or you're in your car, whatever it is, and you start to feel that sense. You start to sense that spark within you that says that you're curious. Is there something more? Is there maybe there's maybe there is something more to my life, or to creation, or to what I'm wanting, the desire to want something more. If that formula hasn't worked for me, and I've checked those boxes, and I've done all these things, and I've tried to prove out, then that curiosity and that spark, when we start to really dive in and keep diving in and keep allowing that fire to start getting stronger and stronger, that's when our whole world starts to shift into something real. That's when we start to feel that actual connection. I would say the biggest risk to that is most people believe that because they've done all of these things to get this outer manifestation, this world, the house, the cars, the family, whatever is outside of us, the job, the money in the account, because they've done all of that, they think that needs to go away. And so a lot of times we start really creating that destruction process, and it's never about what's outside of us. It's what's inside of us. And so that's the real process, is returning home and actually connecting to ourselves, and then rewiring and reverse engineering things inside of us. But most of the time people come in, they've already started a very destructive process in their world.
So is that where the point of coaching comes in? Is the guidance through that to avoid destruction for the sake of destruction?
Yeah, exactly. And that real lost feeling, right? We're all going to feel it to a certain degree, because once we start to create more space, once we start to have more real estate and land and more expansion within ourselves, we get nervous, because space, I think, is what most of us avoid, and it's the very thing that allows us to create and allows us to connect, and it's vital to experience anything new, but it's the unknown, and the unknown is the very definition of fear. So I think, to answer your question, going into coaching, allowing somebody to guide us through all those new spaces within ourselves, and to guide us through, the rewiring process of who we really are, and being able to guide us into space and know that we're not alone, is is a very fast and way more comforting feeling than wandering around the wilderness for, however many years and trying to figure out it on our own.
Yeah. So in that process that you undergo, with clients that come in, the goal is to figure out how to productively, use the space they've created to create instead of just destroy. It's about building that foundation.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And really being able to guide them all around the different dimensions of their world where it's just there's just a ton of expansion, because it's not just what they're thinking. There's just so much more to access that connection and that place back to ourselves. We're so much more than we think we are.
So you mentioned the process of expansion. What do you think people usually misunderstand about that process?
I think the biggest thing that comes up is we haven't fully understood how to reverse that program of do, have, be. And so most people think, they'll come in and they'll say, what do I need to do next in order to connect to myself? What is that process? And so they think about it the same way that they created the old process in the old world, and that foundation doesn't work. And so I would say that the expansion of that is really understanding that there are so many other dimensions to ourselves and what we want, right? It's not about just changing something outside of us. It's not about just going and doing more. And that's where so much the frustration comes in, because I work with people who have done a lot and thinking about doing something more is a very interesting concept to them. So I would say that's the biggest misconception, is that I'm going to create something new the same way I created the old, and that doesn't work.
So then, with the expansion, and when it comes to that point, what's the formula for that? What are we trying to accomplish instead, to figure out what it is we do want, and with the intention of creating rather than just destroying?
The expansion is knowing how to get into that space of being, knowing how to understand. I know for me, as I was in my head and as I was thinking that I was going to get all of these things outside of me, what I wasn't really recognizing was that was all coming from this place of lack. It was coming from the place of what I wasn't and what I was still hoping to get. There is a return home that I think happens first, and the home is ultimately this space, this universe, this creator, this all-powerful being that we all are, and that's uncomfortable.
Why do you think it's important that we have to figure out what we want, in order to connect with that version of ourselves?
If we don't interrogate what we want, then we run victim to what we think we want. we start to only be able to draw from whatever is in our subconscious mind, whatever has been programmed. So there's generational programming, there is religious programming, there is maybe political, maybe, whatever we're programmed to see, whether it's in the movies, whether it's, been in our homes, all of that programming is all of our subconscious mind. And so how can we create something new with all of that old information, with all of that old programming? And so knowing what we want gets really interesting, because I don't think we ever get to the space that says you can create whatever you want. And I think that we're really afraid. It's scary to get to that space and be able to say, if I am the creator of my world and I do get to decide and choose what it looks like and how it feels and what I want to experience, then then there's a lot of accountability in that, and there's a lot of connection to ourselves. There's a lot of power in that.
So alternatively to blowing up their life and following the more illusionary equation of do, have, be, to your previous point, the alternative you're presenting here is
to consciously go in and understand creation, to consciously go in and understand and be able to see ourselves so that we are not susceptible to creating just another illusion, right? So many times people go from relationship to relationship, or they go from job to job, or they go from, they keep thinking, oh, I'm going to do this differently. And that's extremely hard to do subconsciously. So it's going in and being able to say, hey, let's guide you into all these subconscious things, but then also let's go in different doors of you're not just your thoughts or your story. There's this emotional world that we can expand into. There is this spiritual world that we can expand into. There's just so many other dimensions of really knowing how to create and connecting to all of ourselves. So yeah, I would say that being able to expand the truth of who we are and all the different dimensions of ourselves and be able to bring that to the present moment would ultimately be how I guide people in to really seeing themselves and really knowing where connection and love comes from. Because once we return home to ourselves and know all the different dimensions of ourselves, then and only then can we actually share space with another to really connect in our relationships.
Talk to me about the first time you started really resonating with the concept of I see you.
When Avatar came out?
I think that'd be when Avatar came out.
That's an interesting question and very dimensional for me, because I think I always wanted to be seen. I was the youngest of 7 kids. Everything was always loud and crazy. And, I think wanting to be seen is something that we all feel at a very young age and a very natural feeling. But mostly through my relationship, I think, is when I really started to recognize, wait a minute, I want to be seen. And that was that spark that kind of came in within me that was like, there's something I'm really wanting here.
How did that translate to wanting to see others? And what did that look like in connection?
I think because I always wanted to be seen, that in some ways, naturally, I was really curious about other people. I was really trying to see other people, because I was also taught that's what you do, that you get things outside of you, or that's what you do. It was the golden rule: you do unto others as you do to yourself, right? So I was always trying to get what I wanted internally, externally. So I think I did that for other people just by inherently wanting it for myself.
So what does that look like in terms of how do you actually see somebody else? What is that process?
I love thinking about the idea of seeing somebody, because what I think most people don't understand is that we can only see to the level that we see ourselves. And so when we recognize something in another person, good or bad, right? Like the idea of whatever we're seeing in the outer world is something that we recognize within ourselves. And so going through the process of seeing ourselves or seeing myself became such a rich and valuable experience, because as a mom of 6 kids and a business owner and a coach, I believed I was needing to give other people things, and I felt guilty or I felt shame for wanting to return or see myself in a lot of ways. And so what I didn't know was the more I expanded myself, the more I loved myself, the more I went into every dimension of myself, the more I understood my emotions, the more I understood, unconditional love for myself, all the exploration within myself, then and only then was I able to actually experience it with other people.
At what point did you realize that separation from another person was essential to being able to see them?
I think what stirred it for me was I believed that I was a real people pleaser. I believed that if I went into somebody else's world, is what I thought I was doing. In any relationship, if I went into their world, I talked about, who they were, what they, if I held the mirror up for them and I was able to see them, then that was the world that we were sharing. And that betrayal of seeing myself or not staying connected to my own thoughts, my own feelings, my own story, my own passion, my own emotions, whatever it was, that separation from that and going into someone else's world is kind of how it showed up for me. And I realized that I wasn't even bringing myself to the relationship. And so many times when people come into my office, they believe they're living in a joint reality. Like they can't figure out why they can't get on the same page, or they can't figure out why they're not connecting, because one person or they're both really trying to say, how come we're not seeing things the same? Because we're supposed to, because that's what connection is. And so to your question, separating that out and recognizing that there are two separate worlds and there are two separate people is what starts to create that space to connect in. So that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, we talked about earlier the space between things.
Yeah.
And how that's where some of that connection and that magic actually does live.
Yeah. It's where it all lives in so many ways, because without it, we can't meet anywhere, right? It's this power struggle that ends up happening in relationships where it's like, you come over to my world or I'll come over to your world, or which world are we supposed to live in order to connect? And that's not where connection actually is. It's in the space between it.
And so the purpose of recognizing that you are two separate worlds and living in two different spaces and bringing those things to the table is to facilitate space to actually recognize that there is a relationship between two things.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, the relationship between two things, I think, is a great way to put it, because the space that we connect in is ultimately within ourselves, and then in the expansion, there's room for the relationship. Yeah.
What does that process look like in your office?
Well, it's scary. It goes back to when I said one of the most painful things I realized was I was living in an illusion or a storyline that I had created, and that looking at my partner, I didn't even know who he really was, actually, because I was too busy creating my own story and my own illusion around it. And so when people come in, I think that's when they really start to recognize that they don't know what's real. They don't know. It's very disorienting to be able to say, where do we connect? Where do I start? Where do you start? Where do we meet? What is reality? And that separation of those two worlds ends up really allowing people to return home and actually, for sometimes the very first time in their relationship, start to see each other.
Do you think seeing somebody else means loving them?
Absolutely.
Tell us about what it means to get to a clean canvas.
Well, it was no small journey. And I would say that I was obsessed with the journey, and I was very thorough with it. And what I mean by that is once my illusionistic world crumbled and burned and there was nothing left, I think so many people go back into the same cycle and think that they they get a clean slate, right? They go back into a new relationship, or they get a new job, or whatever it is, and they think they have a clean canvas. But ultimately, in order to get a clean canvas, there is a discovery process. There's a return to knowing ourself on every dimension that is work that like I said, I think we have to be very diligent at, and it takes a lot of time and energy to really understand. But the process of getting to a clean canvas is knowing that I have gone back through every dimension of myself and reconciled the lack that I felt, the pain that I felt, the way that I was programmed, and dismantling everything that I thought I knew about myself. And that includes the way that, my subconscious works. So it's a very vulnerable process, and scary to get to a blank canvas, because it takes an interrogation of the self that on every dimension that most people don't do without really good coaching.
Yeah. So what is the canvas? Would that just be your life, your reality?
Yeah. I would say that blank canvas is the awareness that you can create anything. It's creating from that space that says every last thing is possible. What do you want?
How does emotional intelligence and understanding the language of energy, the energy behind the words we're saying, just energy in general, our emotions, how does a heightened awareness of those and an intelligence around the way we handle them translate to obtaining this clean canvas?
So emotional intelligence, the reason why it's one of my favorite subjects is because the shortcut is it's a shortcut to truth and the present moment. And it's a shortcut to connection, because it's more powerful when you can feel me and I'm actually in this state of emotion or energy, versus when I'm in my head and I'm just talking. It happened even as I was recording, right? It's like when I get in my head and I just start talking, it's totally different than actually getting into the vibration or the emotion, and knowing that emotions are safe and they're comfortable and they're normal and that they're not meant to be avoided, allows us to connect. Because it's the energy that is between us. It's the energy that we're putting off. It's those vibrations that actually allows us to be in the same place.
How does having a clean canvas and high emotional intelligence, what does that look like in the ultimate relationship?
There was an ongoing question for me that I think I became obsessed with. And it was, is it possible to co-create? Is it possible to be with a person and actually create the same thing? And the reason why I say that, and I can feel anybody listening, because I can feel a version of myself that really laughs at this. Like, well, of course it is, right? Like, we have kids together, we have a house together, this is what we do all the time together. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a real shared connection and creating in the same world. Because most of the time, 90% of the time when people come in my office, they believe they're already connected and they're not. They're actually very disconnected from their own space and their own world. They're already building those illusions. And so once we get into that space of what is possible, that clean canvas, the idea would be, can we actually create something together?
We've been talking for a while now, and I think it's all leading up to this idea of what is real. What is real love, and how do we learn how to facilitate that? How would you describe what real love feels like, real connection?
It's the question, isn't it? It's the big question. I have people who come into my office. I have relationships that come into my office, and I remember for myself, I always believed that love was sacrifice. And in a real, ultimate and pure relationship, I don't believe that there is any sacrifice. I believe that real love has real freedom. It has no attachments. And so there's always space for us to be experiencing anything that is coming up for us. And there's no limitations. There's no give or take per se, that there is only a building of what is. And the space itself just continues to expand. And so I would say the biggest difference is there truly is freedom and abundance, and there is no longer this idea of self-sacrifice. I believe that the moment you actually start to experience any type of sacrifice or any type of self-betrayal, whatever is in that moment, it will dismantle. When the relationship itself comes before the self, when the relationship, or anything outside, gets in the way of the self-discovery and the self-connection, it will dismantle faster and faster, because it doesn't work that way when you're in that space of real love and connection.
I feel like it's important to note here that we're talking about something that goes beyond the storybook ending, right?
Good point.
What does that mean to you?
Love exists in all of the vulnerability and in all the mess and in all the journey and the creation process. So the more vulnerable, the more I lean in, the more connection I actually get. It's the paradox idea of the movies. The reason why we love them so much is because I think they do display this level of vulnerability in a lot of ways. And I think we just don't really know how to attain that. We don't know how to be that vulnerable that often. And so I think it's why it's so alluring in a lot of ways. But the happily ever after, I found somebody and therefore the journey is done, is fairly comical, because I think we all know that reaching that happily ever after is not the goal, and that it is in the journey and in the emotions and in the expansion and the burning and the alchemy that goes into play. It's in that whole process. How much can we expand it and widen it? And there's just so much to be explored when we talk about what goes on beyond the 2-hour movie that we watched.
How does the coaching process facilitate the expansion of that beyond that 2-hour movie, beyond, traditional perceptions of what a relationship can achieve to achieve something so much more than that?
I think the coaching process is all about being able to access every dimension of ourselves so that we can bring that to the relationship. And then from there, I believe that keeping ourselves in that state of awareness, keeping ourselves unattached to the future or unattached to the past or unattached to something outside of us, really continually going into the space of the present moment and being able to allow the power of the present moment to connect with, to be on the journey and to be able to connect in that present moment. I would say ultimately is the process of coaching is allowing someone to be able to be alongside of you as you're going through that process, and watching how subconsciously we try and go back into the maze. We try and go back into those patterns, and then unattaching from that and allowing ourselves to continually be in the space of, real freedom, power, creation. I think that's the gift in it, is because I can speed that up for people in a lot of ways, so that they don't get trapped back in their own mazes.
Talk a little bit about the importance of that blank canvas for getting started in this process of really achieving real love and reaching that real state of connection that is so natural.
The reason the blank canvas has been so crucial is because it goes back to the idea of unpacking your world, or your baggage, if you want to say, you bring all of that with you into the relationship if you haven't actually organized it and put it away and left it in different places. And so this idea of a clean canvas is allowing ourselves to have access to all the different components or pieces or resources that we need, but then really experiencing, real freedom and creation, I think, would be the biggest part of that, because that clean canvas really allows us to paint whatever we want, and it lets us explore what kind of picture or what kind of experience we really want to have. Where if you think about it, if you come and you bring, an old painting and you're trying to paint over it, it's difficult to get that crisp and clear, pure version of what it is that you want to create. It gets really messy and hard to paint on an old canvas.
So what about when you have that new canvas? What happens next? You just start painting on it?
Most of us are not comfortable with clean canvases. Most, even if I take it into a landscape, if I were to say, or somebody was to say to me, I just gave you 200 acres. Now go build something on it, right? That's intimidating in a lot of ways. Instead of saying, here's a whole village or here's a whole city, now just run it, right? There's a difference in that building process. There's a very real, power and accountability in actually building what we want. So I think people are afraid of the space. I think we're afraid of that canvas. So it's a very sacred piece of land or real estate or canvas that we're talking about. It's a pretty beautiful thing. So what do? You are very selective and very intentional on what you want that picture to look like.
So in the ultimate relationship, in doing all the work that we've talked about and in committing to the process, what does it look like to start building or creating or painting?
I think at this point, the word that comes to mind is alignment. And finding, I wouldn't say finding, I would say allowing ourselves to be in alignment with another person, and in the world inside of us and outside of us, being able to be that vulnerable and that present and want to paint a very similar picture would be the experience. Being able to share spaces or even share a canvas with somebody would be the ultimate relationship, is to be able to paint and create on the same canvas and have both painters adding and really exploding what that canvas can look like.
So is that the goal you're working towards with your clients, with couples that come into your office?
Absolutely. Yeah, to get to a space where there is abundance, no sacrifice, no attachments, complete freedom, and to be able to co-create together. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in learning any more, you can visit my website at tanyanelson.com and sign up for a free discovery session. I'd love to meet with you and talk with you.